Some of the biggest moments in history started with someone messing up. History likes to pretend it is organized. It's not. Let's get right to the point. Number 10, pocket lunch. Imagine working next to a machine so powerful, it accidentally cooks your snack before you even know you are hungry. That is basically what happened to Percy Spencer. He was an engineer working with radar equipment and magnetrons, the kind of technology used during wartime radar research. One day, he noticed something strange. A candy bar in his pocket had melted. It was a simple peanut butter chocolate bar, widely documented as a peanut cluster bar. Now, most people would be annoyed. You reach into your pocket, pull out chocolate soup, and immediately think, great, my pants are ruined. But Spencer did something much more useful. He asked, wait, why did that happen? That tiny question led him to test what microwave energy could do to food. Soon, popcorn kernels were popping. An egg reportedly exploded. And eventually, that strange little pocket accident helped lead to the microwave oven, which means one of the most common kitchen appliances in the world started with a man accidentally cooking candy in his clothes. Number 9, the failed heart pill. This one begins in a place that does not sound funny at all, a medical trial. Researchers were studying sildenafil as a possible treatment for heart-related problems, including angina. The goal was serious, the science was serious, but then the drug started doing something else. It was not especially successful at becoming the heart medication they hoped for. But trial participants began reporting a very different effect, and at some point, someone had to sit in a meeting and say, very carefully, so, the heart drug is not doing much for the heart, but we are getting some extremely enthusiastic side effect reports. That failed direction eventually helped create Viagra, which is why this story is so good. It is not just a drug had a side effect. That happens all the time. The wild part is that the side effect became the entire business. The original plan walked into the room, tripped over its own shoes, and somehow walked out wearing sunglasses. Imagine the drug commercial. Side effects may include nausea, heartburn, indigestion, and an abnormal gait. Moving on. Number 8, the lab day that got weird. In 1943, Swiss chemist Albert Hofmann was working at Sandow's laboratories in Basel. He was not trying to launch a counterculture movement. He was not trying to become part of music festivals, psychology debates, or every documentary with swirling colors. He was doing chemistry. Years earlier, he had synthesized LSD while researching compounds related to lysergic acid. Then, while working with it again, he accidentally absorbed a small amount. And then his workday got strange. He felt restless, dizzy, unusual. The kind of unusual where you stop pretending you are just tired and go home. A few days later, he intentionally tested a small dose to understand what had happened. That led to the famous bicycle ride home, where ordinary streets turned into something much less ordinary. Because of wartime restrictions, Hofmann had to ride his bicycle home from the lab. Unfortunately, reality had already clocked out for the day. As he pedaled, the world stopped making sense. Time seemed to stretch and collapse. Buildings bent and twisted like he was looking through a funhouse mirror, except there was nothing fun about it. By the time he got home, things got even worse. The walls seemed to breathe. Furniture appeared to move on its own, and when a neighbor kindly stopped by with a glass of milk, Hofmann became convinced she was a terrifying witch. At one point, he genuinely thought he had died and somehow taken a wrong turn into hell. About 6 hours later, the hallucinations faded, reality quietly re-entered the chat, and Hofmann realized he'd just experienced the world's first recorded LSD trip, which has to be one of the strangest answers anyone has ever given to the question, how was work today? This did not just become a weird chemistry footnote. LSD later influenced psychiatry, neuroscience, art, music, politics, and the entire cultural atmosphere of the 1960s. And it started with a chemist in a lab realizing something is happening to me and I should probably not be near glassware right now. The strange part is not just the accident. It is that the accident opened a door people are still arguing about. Number 7, the sweet hand. This one sounds like a lab safety poster made to scare chemistry students. In 1879, Konstantin Fallberg was working with coal tar compounds in a laboratory connected to Johns Hopkins. Later, he noticed something odd. His hand tasted sweet. That sentence alone should make every modern scientist sit up straight. Because today, if your hand tastes like anything after lab work, the correct reaction is not curiosity. It is panic, soap, and possibly a phone call. But Fallberg connected the sweetness to the chemical work he had been doing. That discovery led to saccharin, one of the first first artificial sweeteners. And suddenly, a bizarre moment at the edge of bad hygiene became part of food history. He apparently forgot to wash his hands before eating dinner. While eating bread, he noticed everything tasted unusually sweet. Then he realized his fingers tasted sweet too, and traced it back to a compound from the lab. So he wasn't just casually licking his hands like a lollipop, although that would make for a much better story. A man licks his unwashed hands, and eventually the world gets diet drinks, sugar substitutes, and a sweetener that probably ended up in your coffee this week. Number 6, the glass that refused to break. Douard Benedictus was a French chemist. One day, he reportedly dropped a glass flask. Now, everyone knows what is supposed to happen when glass hits the floor. There is a sharp crack, a tiny disaster. Then someone spends the next 10 minutes saying, "Nobody move," while holding a broom like they are defusing a bomb. But this flask did something weird. It cracked, but it did not fly apart. The pieces stayed together. Why? Because a thin film of cellulose nitrate had dried inside the flask, almost like an invisible net holding the glass in place. That observation helped lead to laminated safety glass, and that mattered a lot once cars became common. Early car accidents were not just dangerous because of the crash. The windows were also auditioning for the role of flying knives. Back then, the windshield safety strategy was basically good luck. So a dropped flask became a clue. A broken object showed how braking could be made safer. Number 5, the lying cylinder. In 1938, Roy Plunkett was working at DuPont with tetrafluoroethylene gas. The plan was to study gases connected to refrigerants. Very normal chemistry work. Then one of the cylinders acted strange. The gas would not come out. At first, this sounds like the most boring problem imaginable. A stuck container, a bad valve, a lab version of shaking a ketchup bottle and getting nothing. But there was one detail that made it weird. The cylinder still had weight, so the gas was gone, but something was still inside. When Plunkett and his team opened it up, they found a white, waxy solid. The gas had polymerized into polytetrafluoroethylene, better known as PTFE, later branded as Teflon. That accident eventually gave the world an incredibly slippery, heat-resistant material used in everything from industrial equipment to non-stick cookware. And the whole thing began with a container that looked empty, but was secretly not empty at all. From there, it was a slippery slope into millions of kitchens. Number 4, the purple mistake. In 1856, William Henry Perkin was only 18 years old. He was trying to synthesize quinine, a treatment connected to malaria. That is a huge goal, a serious goal, a maybe this could help save lives kind of goal. Instead, he made a dark, messy sludge, which is usually where a failed experiment goes to die. You clean the glassware, you sigh dramatically, you pretend the day never happened. But Perkin noticed that this ugly residue could create a vivid purple dye. That dye became Movine, one of the first commercial synthetic dyes, and that mattered way more than someone invented a pretty color. Before synthetic dyes, bright colors could be expensive, difficult, and tied to status. Purple especially had a long history of being associated with wealth and power. Then a teenager messes up a malaria experiment, and suddenly chemistry starts changing fashion, manufacturing, and industry. Perkin did not get the medicine he wanted, but he did help launch a new chemical age. Sometimes the wrong answer is only wrong for the question you asked. Number 3, the glow-in-the-dark. In 1895, Wilhelm Röntgen was experimenting with cathode rays. This is already the kind of old science scene that feels made for a movie. Dark room, strange equipment, a scientist alone in a dark laboratory, surrounded by strange glass tubes and humming electrical equipment. Back when the scientific method was about 3 parts curiosity and 1 part, let's see what happens. Then he noticed something that should not have been happening. A fluorescent screen was glowing, even though the tube was covered. Something invisible seemed to be passing through material and reaching the screen. Röntgen did not know what the rays were, so he called them X-rays. The X basically meant unknown, which is a wonderfully honest name. Then came the image that changed everything, the bones of his wife's hand with her wedding ring visible. Imagine seeing that for the first time. Not a drawing, not a guess. Your living hand, but with the hidden structure revealed. Medicine changed almost immediately. For the first time, doctors had a way to look inside the body without cutting it open. Number 2, the dirty dish. Alexander Fleming came back from holiday in 1928 and began sorting through petri dishes of bacteria. Not because little Alexander was coughing up phlegm after catching whatever was going around at the family gathering. Different Fleming. One of the petri dishes was contaminated with mold. For most people, that is not a discovery. That is trash. You see a dirty dish, you make the face, and you clean it before someone asks why your lab looks like an abandoned refrigerator. But Fleming noticed something strange. Around the mold, the bacteria were not growing. There was a clear zone, almost like the mold had created a tiny, invisible force field. That mold was later identified as a penicillium mold, and the substance connected to it became penicillin. This is one of the most important medical stories ever told, but the beginning is almost embarrassingly ordinary: a contaminated dish, a messy lab moment, a thing that went wrong. The miracle was not that mold landed on a plate. Mold lands on things constantly. The miracle was that Fleming looked at the mess and did not just see mess. He saw a question. Why are the bacteria dying there? That question helped open the antibiotic era and change the treatment of bacterial infections. And finally, number 1, the wrong turn. This is the kind of accident that makes history feel terrifyingly fragile. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was in Sarajevo with his wife Sophie. Earlier that day, there had already been an assassination attempt. A bomb had been thrown. It failed to kill him. So the day was already tense, already dangerous. Already the kind of day where every decision should have been handled carefully. Later, the Archduke's car was supposed to follow a changed route, but the driver took a wrong turn. Not the hillbilly, inbred kind. Somehow, much worse. The car ended up right in front of Gavrilo Princip, one of the assassins connected to a Serbian nationalist group known as the Black Hand. Princip fired. Franz Ferdinand and Sophie were killed. That assassination triggered the July crisis, and the alliance system of Europe began pulling countries toward World War I. Now, to be clear, the wrong turn did not single-handedly create the entire war. Europe was already full of tension, nationalism, militarism, rival empires, and alliances stacked like dry wood, but that wrong turn was the spark landing in exactly the wrong place. That is what makes it so unsettling. A driver turns the car down the wrong street. Then the 20th century changes. Just a road, a car, a mistake, and a world that was already waiting to catch fire. And that is the strange pattern behind all of these stories. History does not always move like a straight line. History is full of wrong turns that change the course of civilization. The accident is not always the miracle. The miracle may be noticing it. Or, in the darkest cases, realizing too late that one tiny moment was sitting on top of something enormous. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.